All right, let's get right into it. The legendary venture capitalist Ben Horowitz has a pretty terrifying warning for basically every company on the planet. The world you thought you knew, it's already gone. So today, we're unpacking his argument for the new laws of physics in business, the massive real-world roadblocks we're about to slam into, and what all of this really means for the future of tech. So let's start with the one question that every leader, every founder, every CEO needs to be asking themselves right now. Because that window of opportunity, where a great product could buy you a 5, maybe even 10-year head start, well, that window has collapsed. Just let that sink in. Your entire competitive edge, something you worked years to build, could have a shelf life of just a few weeks. And this is the absolute core of Horowitz's argument. He's not just saying things are moving faster. He's saying the fundamental rules, the bedrock principles we use to build great companies on, have been totally rewritten by AI. It's like the very physics of how business works has changed. So what does this brave new world actually look like? Well, the very first step is just accepting that the old playbooks, the strategies that worked for the last 20 years, are now basically useless. This crazy compression of time is what Horowitz is calling the SaaS apocalypse. It's a full-blown existential crisis for any software-as-a-service company that was built on creating long-term value. I mean, think about it. If your competition can replicate your entire moat, your secret sauce, in a single month, what's the long-term value of your company anymore? It's a genuinely scary question. Okay, so if the old rules are dead and gone, what are these new laws of physics that are running the show in the age of AI? Horowitz points to two major ideas that have been completely turned on their head. First up is that old piece of engineering wisdom: you can't just throw money at a complex software problem. The mythical man-month was treated like gospel. Well, Horowitz says that's just not true anymore. Now, if you have enough capital, you can literally buy all the GPUs and all the data you need to basically brute force your way to a solution. The money as a weapon axiom is back. And that leads directly to the second massive shift. Your traditional customer moats, they're vanishing. Things like data lock-in, where it was just too painful for a customer to move their information, or UI lock-in, where your users were so used to your interface they wouldn't switch. Poof, gone. An AI can replicate code, move massive data sets, and adapt to any user interface almost instantly. But here's the twist. This absolutely incredible digital revolution is running headfirst into a very real, very physical wall. We are now facing these huge, real-world bottlenecks that are threatening to slow this whole thing way, way down. And what's so critical to understand here is the urgency. Horowitz is warning that this isn't some problem we have to solve in the next decade. No, the United States is essentially at its electricity limit right now, today. And when you look at this chart, you can really see the scale of the challenge. The growth in electricity capacity in China just dwarfs what's happening in the US. The demand from all these new AI data centers is absolutely skyrocketing, but our ability to actually supply that power just isn't keeping up. And you know what? It's not just about electricity. This bottleneck is popping up at almost every single point in the supply chain. We've got a shortage of rare earth minerals, not enough manufacturing capacity, not enough of the right kind of high-end memory or power transformers. Even the chips we're using are a problem. They were designed for gaming, and they eat up way too much power. It seems like almost everything is a constraint. So, we have these brand new digital rules, but we're stuck with old physical limits. This collision creates a whole new class of problems, and Horowitz argues that this is exactly where another, often controversial technology steps in: crypto. And Horowitz lays out this really clear problem and solution framework. First, you've got the identity problem. AI is creating deepfakes and bots, and that's just destroying trust online. The proposed solution? Crypto, which can offer cryptographic proof to verify who and what is actually real. Second, you have the economics problem. As AIs start to act like independent economic agents, they're going to need a way to transact. The solution he points to is a true internet-native money, which is exactly what crypto was designed to be. This new world also seems to be heading down one of two very different paths for the future of tech. Path one is massive consolidation. Think about the Industrial Revolution, where hundreds of car companies eventually boiled down to just 3 giants, and VCs basically turned into bankers. In that future, a handful of huge AI companies will own everything. But there's another path, a more open future, where the core AI models become a public utility, kind of like electricity, and venture capital gets to fund this vibrant, creative ecosystem of apps built right on top of it. Okay, I get it.
Hearing about collapsing business models and infrastructure that's at its breaking point, it can all feel pretty scary. But Horowitz makes a really powerful case that if you just look back at history, there's actually a pretty good reason to be optimistic. The thing is, we've been through these huge technological shifts before. Can you imagine living through the transition from a farming economy to an industrial one? It must have been absolutely terrifying for the people going through it. It was a completely different world. But ultimately, things got better for everyone.
I mean, just look at this. Back in 1750, something like 94% of Americans were farmers. Today, it's less than 2%. That means that almost every single job from that era is just gone. And yet we created entirely new roles, things like a product marketing manager or a venture capitalist that people back then would have thought were completely ridiculous.
And that brings us to the most crucial point of all. Human ingenuity never, ever stops. The famous economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that once our basic needs like food and shelter were met, we'd all just work 15 hours a week. But what he totally missed is our unbelievable, almost magical ability to invent new things that we absolutely need, from having multiple cars to going on vacations to having chef-prepared meals delivered to our door. Our wants constantly become our needs, and that's the engine that drives the creation of brand new economies and brand new jobs.
Okay, that was a ton of information. Let's do a quick high-density recap of all the hard facts and core ideas we just covered. So let's put it all together. We saw how the old rules of business are shattered, creating a new reality where money really can solve software problems and customer moats have evaporated. We looked at the very real infrastructure gaps, from electricity to chips, that are holding us back. We explored how AI is creating new problems of trust and economics that crypto might just be poised to solve. And all of this leads us to two possible futures, one dominated by a few tech giants and another built on an open, public platform.
Look, if you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this. The game has changed. Fundamentally, survival and definitely success now depends on understanding and adapting to these new laws of physics, not trying to defend a castle built on the old rules.
And that leaves us with one final big question for you to chew on. We've seen the two paths that Horowitz says are ahead for the future of technology. Either a few massive companies control everything, or AI becomes an open platform for anyone to innovate on. Which of those two futures do you actually think is more likely to happen? And more importantly, why?
So what do you think? Are we headed for consolidation or for an open utility? Drop your reasoning in the comments below. We really want to know what you think, and we'll reply to every comment with a full list of all the tools and resources from this explainer. Thanks so much for watching.